What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here with a preview for the Dell Technology Championship. This is the second leg of the FedEx Cup playoffs, which means we're down to 100 players in this field, with the top 70 and ties making the cut. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but when you have 70 or more percent of the field that is going to make the cut this week, the cream should rise to the top, okay? When you get nearly everyone in the field who's playing 4 rounds, you want as many of these really good players as you can. Sometimes with fields where there's 140 in the field, you know, you can take a flyer, a guy makes a cut and he pays for himself. That's probably unlikely to happen this week. Let's get right into this. We're going to go over my key stats first, and then we'll go through some of the players that I like. Everything that you see throughout this video is available on dfsondemand.com, both this research spreadsheet and the data visuals that I will get to here in a moment. So let's look at the key stats for this week. And again, I think the cream is going to rise to the top. I've gone with some pretty straightforward statistics. TPC Boston, a course where nothing really jumps out. I don't think it's one specific skill set that's going to win here. So with that being said, a couple of strokes gained stats off the tee, around the green, and putting. I added a second shot stat with greens in regulation. And then, of course, we have birdie or better for DraftKings scoring. And then the one that's really specific to this course is going to be the par 4 scoring efficiency between 450 and 500 yards. I believe there are 6 of them on this course, which should make them a very valuable set of holes for this week. You'll notice that the top names in my model here are all big names, basically all guys over 10 grand. That should not surprise you at this point in the season. It's a fairly close, so I mean the top 4 guys separated by 4 points between 80 and 84 is pretty rare. And again, no one in the 90s makes me think that this field is a little bit more wide open than we may have seen in the final weeks of the regular season. This field is so incredibly deep, it's really tough to argue against any of these guys at the top, and I think a lot of this is going to be format based on who you're going to play. Like, if you want to take on a lot of risk, you can take on Hideki Matsuyama as a bounce back candidate. If you're playing cash and you would just rather take someone chalkier, Jordan Spieth and Dustin Johnson are certainly in play for that. So I think the format of game that you're playing is really going to dictate who you should be rostering here. And as the week goes on, as my buddy Brad Messersmith comes out with his projected ownership, I think that's going to drive a lot of decision making. And I think it should for you too. So with that being said, we'll go through a couple of these guys here, but I can make a case for and against basically every single one of these guys. Now, let's start with Rory. So Rory McIlroy, a fairly disappointing, 34th last week at the Northern Trust. But before that, the guy was absolutely scorching hot. And what you're going to hear about Rory this week is how good he is at TPC Boston. So we'll just go back to the game logs here. And this is just the last 5 years of game logs. Rory McIlroy, in 5 trips to this championship, is averaging 99 DraftKings points. Best in the field. It's pretty unbelievable. Here are his actual game logs. He's won it twice, and he has a 5th place. So that is going to score you a lot of DraftKings points, obviously. He has the caliber of play that you need to win here. He has that stature to be able to pull off a FedEx Cup playoff win. I will be interested to see what the ownership trends look like for Rory. Are people going to give up on him? Are people going to opt to take Jordan Spieth and Dustin Johnson over Rory McIlroy this week? I don't know. Rory's the guy who his ownership will probably dictate exactly what I do with him. So I'll keep an eye on that. I'll probably tweet out some stuff, but $9,800 for Rory McIlroy is nearly criminal. And just to go quickly through this, he's probably never sniffed 9,800 before. I could go back to the game logs for this season. Actually, I have it here. Let's just do it. So let's just look at the game logs, and we'll just search for Rory. And yeah, here's his salaries for the year. 10,600 was the lowest he was. That was at the Masters. He's 9,800 this week. Pretty good deal. Right below him, or a few guys below him, is Jason Day. So let's look at Jason Day, who basically backdoors himself with a 68-67 on the weekend, a 6th place finish last week, a top 10 at the PGA in his start previous to that. And let's look at some of Jason Day's history here. Here he is. Just look at the last 4 years here. 15th, 12th, 7th, 13th. Then he had a 51st. Then a 3rd and a 2nd. So basically what? 6 top 15s in his last 7 trips. That's really good. If you follow this video series, you know we've been talking up Jason Day a lot over the course of the last couple weeks. We've been saying his game is trending in the right direction. Continues to look that way. Pretty good price at 9,500. Louis Oosthuizen. Back-to-back top 10s. Let's look at Louis a little deeper here. I think I can get his... Here we go, last 5 years. All right, here you go. So Louis only played this 3 times in the last 5 years, but he's finished no worse than a tie for 12th in any of those starts, including a 2nd place in 2012, and he's trending certainly in the right direction. I mean, you can see here, he showed up for the big events. T2 at the Players, T2 at the PGA, T10 at the Northern Trust. Like, you don't get many better fields than this, and Louis is a guy who is clearly trending in the right direction. Paul Casey, another guy that, you know, was really in the thick of it last week at the Northern Trust, shoots a 66 on Saturday, follows it up with a 71, doesn't make up much ground on Sunday. Kind of fades a little bit. And I'm hoping that he fades in a lot of people's memory here, because if you look at him, look at this. 5th place, 13th, 5th, 11th, 5th, last 5 starts. Is that pretty good for Paul Casey? How about his, how about his recent history at TPC Boston? Finished 2nd to Rory last year. The WD screws up his whole average here, but that throws it off. And then before that, he hadn't played it since, 2010, a T25. So I would probably throw that out. I'd probably throw the T25 out. That's too long ago. But a 2nd place last year for a guy who is has made like 5 straight top 10s, something like that. So Paul Casey, certainly on my radar for this week. All right, and looking to build on momentum from some of these guys last week. Kevin Chappell goes out and fires a 64 on Saturday. Respectable, maybe a little disappointing 70 on Sunday, but still a T6 at the first leg here at the Northern Trust. So here's his last 4 starts. T6, T33 at the PGA, T13, T8. What did he do before that? Little cut. Okay. Last month has been really good to Kevin Chappell. If we look at this player profile page and we'll look at Kevin Chappell, what I see here, to me, is a really good GPP play where, yeah, he's volatile, right? Not many guys have a range of outcomes from one week to another of 19 DraftKings points to 109 DraftKings points. That's a pretty big range. So these last 4 is obviously the last month for Kevin Chappell, but you can see going back this year, the guy is capable of going really, really high in DraftKings points, okay? So he shoots that 64 on Saturday. I think he had a birdie streak in there. I obviously think it was a bogey-free round. Like, he can rack up those DraftKings bonuses. And you can see he has scored, let's look at this, at least 83 DraftKings points, 1, 2, 3, 4 times since he won in April, which is not something a lot of guys can do. So guys can average you 66 DraftKings points, but few of them can do it with the upside that Chappell can, especially in this price range. So I think he's worth a pretty solid investment. I probably wouldn't touch him in cash games, But for GPPs, how could you argue? And then I want to show you a couple here. I won't get that far yet, but they're all in the same boat, so I do want to talk about them. So I'm going to pull up this visual, which is everyone on the PGA Tour in the last 4 weeks. So the Wyndham, which was the Bridgestone, the Wyndham, the PGA Championship, and the Northern Trust. I believe I also have this filter where you've had to play 3 of those. So I didn't want any like single outliers. So in the last 4 weeks, if you've played 3 of them, you're on this list. Look at the top bar is average DraftKings points in that span. Look at the massive names on there. Stenson, Thomas, Fowler, DJ, Jason Day, Jordan Spieth, Hideki Matsuyama, Paul Casey. Massive names. The best players in the game. And the 2 that bookended are really interesting. Webb Simpson and Jason Kokrak are number 1 and number 10 in the last 4 weeks. So let's look at Webb Simpson. A 3rd place at the Wyndham, which you could have easily brushed off as a weak field. Then a T6 at the Northern Trust where you have to actually say, wow, okay, maybe something's happening here. Maybe this guy's feeling it. When you go back, I mean, he hasn't missed a cut. I don't know the last time he missed a cut. 5th place at the Dean and DeLuca, T8 at the Travelers, T14 at the Greenbrier. Webb Simpson's having himself a summer, and he's trying to turn it into a really good fall. And he's done that in the first leg of the playoffs here. So hard to argue. Actually, let's look at. I have not done this, so I'll look at it. Look at it with you for the first time here. Webb Simpson. Oh, I knew. Actually, I did know that. Webb Simpson has won here. He has won at TPC Boston. He had a 9th place 3 years ago. The rest of the results are pretty mixed. But a guy who's playing as well as Webb is, which is literally, if you're looking at just DraftKings averages, literally the best on tour in the last 4 weeks. And he's won here. He's gonna have my investment. And then the other guy is Jason Kokrak, who I believe was in a GPP winning lineup last week. It might not have been the winning lineup, but it was definitely a top 5 lineup. It was because somebody had DJ, Spieth, and then a bunch of really low-priced guys, and Kokrak was one of them. And he's perked my ears up a little bit recently, and you can see, I mean, 3 straight cuts made, 2 straight top 25s, scoring enough DraftKings points to make you relevant here, okay? So Kokrak is certainly in play. You saw he was the number 10 ranked golfer in DraftKings points over the last 4 weeks. Let's get back down to that range. I think Duffner is a really good play here. Again, another guy who kind of faded on Sunday last week, but let's look at Duffner here. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so this tab is all the history at TPC Boston. Jason Duffner, and you have to have played here at least 3 times. Jason Duffner has the 10th best scoring average here. So again, look at these names. Rory, Adam Scott, Sergio, Jason Day, Dustin Johnson. Jason Duffner's on here. A guy who's never missed a cut. He has 2 top 10s, 4 top 25s, and he's averaging 69.3 strokes per round here. Another guy that's had a really good season this year. Seems to be playing well. Again, a 20th place last week, and I think he fits here. You saw Keegan on there as well. You saw Russell Henley in my key stats, which if you ever wanted a GPP play, I mean, Russ Henley is feast or famine, boom or bust every single week. Ches Reavie. Where was Ches on my list? Ches is on here somewhere, I think. Here he is. Right below Louis Oosthuizen in DraftKings points over the last 4 weeks, 67. in 3 starts. I'll click him real quick so you can see. Here you go, coming off of 10th place last week. I think he's a pretty good investment. I think Daniel Berger, priced at 6,700, is damn near criminal. Patrick Cantlay, a guy that we talked about a little bit over the last couple weeks, has not played a ton on the tour this year. 9 starts, 9 cuts made, and again a 10th place last week at the Northern Trust. You can see, I mean, these aren't knockout fields, but he has shown the ability to pop up at the top of the leaderboard. Again, he's only played 9 times this year, and he's got 3 top 10s. 33% of his starts this year have resulted in a top 10. Pretty good for Patrick Cantlay. And I think there's at least a couple other guys here. Starts to get pretty ugly. I mean, Johnny Vegas, if you wanted to ride the hot hand. Oh, okay. Yeah, here's the one that I think is pretty significantly mispriced. And I bet you get him at a really good ownership, because he missed the cut last week at the Northern Trust. And, you know, nothing too egregious, right? Like, he's 3 over in 2 rounds, 71, 72. Nothing too terrible. The week before that, he goes T13 at the PGA, T6 at the Open, T5 at the Quicken Loans. I mean, I don't have to read these to you. Outside of that missed cut, the dude's got a ton of high finishes. He projects really well in my key stats. Here we go. He's my 12th ranked golfer. $6,900. And I think we can also look at him. Let's look at his actual player profile here, because I want you to get a good visual of this. Okay. Outside of this missed cut. Okay. First of all, this whole range is since February. So he's missed 2 cuts since February. But really, he's missed 1 in his last 10 starts. It just happens to be last week. So if you know anything, if you follow anything about ownership in the PGA Tour, the number one thing that drops someone's ownership is that they missed the cut the previous week. That's Mark Leishman. Outside of that, how consistent has he been? Okay, no worse than, what, 51 DraftKings points, routinely in the 70s. He can get up into the 80s. He's won this year, right? This was a win, right? Yeah, at the Arnold Palmer. He holds his own in big events, in tough field events. I mean, we've talked about that before with Mark Leishman. And now you get a really good discount. Look at this. $8,400 last week. $8,000. $9,800 a few weeks ago. $6,900 in this field. I think you could do much, much worse. And then that's probably it. I mean, I could make a case for maybe... Man, it's pretty ugly down here. Ian Poulter, who I don't love. Martin Laird, maybe. Coming off a top 20. I just don't love a lot of this. Xander Schauffele maybe would be fine. $6,900, that'd be pretty good. So that's basically it. We will end with the odds as we normally do. So again, if you've never seen this before, on the right-hand column, Vegas odds to win the golf tournament, and then you have the player's salary. These should correlate in some way. You'll see there's some values here. So Jason Day, same odds to win as Hideki Matsuyama, Ricky Fowler, and Rory McIlroy, yet he is the cheapest amongst those guys. Paul Casey, better odds to win than Louis Oosthuizen, and he's cheaper. Adam Scott looks a little bit underpriced, but here's kind of the big one. Here's the one that jumps out about Mark Leishman. The same odds to win as Daniel Berger, and he's $700 cheaper, but he's also better odds to win pretty significantly over all these guys right here. And he's cheaper than all of them. Look, I mean, outside of Molinari, who's the same price, and Schauffele, I mean, there's not another guy who's cheaper. $6,900. I think $6,800 is the min price this week. Leishman is basically min priced at 66 to 1 to win. Same price as Daniel Berger. Better than Duffner. Better than a lot of guys. So I think he's probably the biggest value for this week. So there you go. That's it. That is the preview for the Dell Technology Championship. I hope you enjoy. If you have any questions, comments, tweet me. It's at DFS On Demand. or leave a comment below, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Good luck.